Hi friends, this is Mary and I'm really excited today because I'm going to share my first ever junk journal with you guys. Now, I have done a ton of research before I started doing this because I just kept saying, no, I need more stuff, no, I need to do more research. I just didn't want to start it because I was so nervous, but I am so glad I did because I had such a good time completing this journal. I'm definitely going to be making more of these. As you can see, it turned out to be a very thick journal. So I do have some learnings along the way, so I will share those with you, but let's go ahead and get started. So I did it with a little golden book, and it's called Santa Surprise Book, and I just have this tie around it, a fabric tie with this vintage Santa on it, and that's how I did the binding as well. I did it with fabric. And one of the learnings is that I didn't cut off the golden part of the golden book because I wanted a little bit more, sorry, I've got a cold. I wanted a little bit more room for the fabric here, and that's how the first person, well, not the first person that I watched, but one of the people that I watched also did it. I probably wouldn't do it like that again though, because as you can see, here it's bent a little bit right here as well, and I probably would want it completely straight. So that's probably why I would cut off the golden part the next time around. But other than that, I really am happy with the way that this thing turned out. The one thing I'm not sure about is I'm not sure if I wanted to cover the back with anything. I do love the vintage graphics or the vintage illustrations here. And so I'm not sure if I wanted to cover that with a piece of scrapbook paper or not. But let me know what you think in the comments. I'd really like to know your opinion on what you think I should do. If I should cover the back, inside, and outside covers with scrapbook paper or not. But anyway, let's get started here. On the first page, I did, there's no writing on here. There was a pencil writing of James Welch, but I was able to erase it. So anyone, which is me, because this is going to be my journal, is going to be able to write their name right there, and I'm so excited. On the first page here, I put a library card, and one of the other learnings I had was that I only used single-sided page scrapbook paper. So on each of the sides I ended up adding another piece of scrapbook paper, which in turn created a pocket for almost every single page. And that's why this book is so thick. So next time I will probably just use double-sided scrapbooking paper to make it a lot thinner. But I do like the pockets. I do like how that turned out. Really like everything about it, but I'm excited to hear your opinion and what you all think of it. So here's the first page, and then in the first page I just have this little postcard here. And that was just a cutout from a scrapbooking paper pad. And then I have a lot of vintage cards in here, so that's what I did here with the belly band. And then I did a doily side tuck. I'm not going to take every single thing out of here because that would make this probably an hour-long video, and there's 164 pages in here, and that's without the ephemera and add-ons. So it's a pretty big book. I'm pretty proud of it though, for this being my first journal. I did add some velvet to a lot of the sides here, and here's a craft bag with the vintage card in there. These are also pockets. I did half-page pockets as well, or quarter-page pockets, and I put like postcards and vintage greeting cards and regular greeting cards in there. I do have coffee dyed paper with doily imprints on it. But there is a ton of vintage in this book. I mean, it is just filled with vintage. all of these greeting cards are vintage. There's vintage recipes, vintage milk caps, and then here's just like a flip down for more writing space. Really liked this gold paper. Here's just the side tuck. And again, all of these are pockets. Every one of these pages. This is a wallpaper flip up. A vintage recipe card. Vintage graph paper. A vintage airmail envelope. Vintage stamps. Wallpaper flip up again. And here starts Santa's surprise book. I included the entire book in order throughout this entire junk journal. And it has the best illustrations in this book. Oh my gosh, they're just beautiful. I also have a vintage children's dictionary, which I cut out pieces of. I mean, this book is hilarious. I mean, look at how cute. They use words in here that you just don't use anymore, but it's just part of the vintage of it. Another flip up. More vintage graphing paper. Some trim on the side, pom-pom trim. These die cuts are from the Paper Studio. They're vintage reproductions. And then I use the Merry Days collection from Crate Paper to use for the scrapbooking paper. Some bingo cards. And here's another flip up. Again, all of these are pockets. They all have something different in them. All I really need to add now are the photos, and I'm going to do that next year because I'm a little behind for this year. So this will be my next year's December daily. I love this trim right here, the candy trim. I loved using these little paper bags. Some more vintage graph paper. Vintage children's dictionary page. Some velvet trim. This is a vintage Carols for Christmas book with lots of music in there. This is a vintage tag. This is that neat sequin trim. Flips back and forth from green to red. This is a vintage recipe booklet. And I love this paper. I bought this off Etsy. Another flip up with the coffee dyed doily paper. Naughty or Nice. Another doily tuck with a vintage Christmas postcard. Some more velvet trim and another vintage greeting card. Another vintage greeting card. This is a vintage postcard. Here's some vintage seals. This is some vintage recipes, some velvet trim and a vintage seal, a side tuck with some pom-pom trim, some vintage graph paper. This is some beautiful lace trim. Not vintage though. It's a vintage greeting card with a vintage seal. And I love this one right here, Bank of Happiness. It's such a cute card. More vintage greeting cards and vintage seals. This is a vintage applique. This is just a little kitty Kleenex that I found this year at Michael's. Some tinsel trim. Some Merry Days ephemera. Shakers. This is a vintage coaster. Some more velvet trim. Some more Paper Studio die cuts. This is just a playing card. Vintage playing card. Another vintage recipe, Limelight Pie. I thought this was really neat. It was in the book, this old tape from where the page ripped. Some more vintage graph paper, another vintage recipe, a ton more stuff in these pockets, some more tinsel trim, some more Merry Day shakers, vintage graph paper. I'm going to put my kids' Christmas lists on this Dear Santa card. Some more coffee dyed paper. Some more die cuts from Paper Studio. Vintage recipe cards, coffee dyed doily paper. This is some gold paper. Another doily side tuck. Another side tuck here. And this is just another pull out for extra writing space. And here's the last page of the book. And that is my first ever junk journal, everybody. I'm so excited. I cannot believe I finished it, and I'm so excited to get started on my next one. I think I'm going to make a Snow and Cocoa one for my next one, and I think I'm going to go ahead and sell that one. So I'll probably show a little bit more on how I make that one so that everybody can see and just see how I make it, and maybe give me some ideas along the way. So I'm really excited to start this journey of junk journals, and just so excited that I'm finished with my first one. It really only took me 2 days, so it wasn't bad once I had everything together. Like, I say 2 days, and I mean 2 days of solid work, so it's spread upon, you know, probably a couple weeks time. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think, and any tips that you might have. And until next time, see you later, friends. Love ya. Bye.